Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us for the COVID-19 Relief and Recovery Committee of the 21st of April. I'll declare the meeting open at 6 minutes past 5 and start by acknowledging that we meet on the lands of the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation and pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging. Item 2, for members on leave of absence, I can see that we have no apologies and all committee members accounted for, being myself, Councillor Wondaszewski and Councillor Castle. Question time and receiving of public statements. Manager of Governance, have we received any questions for the meeting?
Through you, Mayor Cole, yes, we've received a question and some statements from Andrew Main of North Perth. I did invite Andrew to attend the meeting to raise these questions and statements himself, but he doesn't appear to have logged on yet. So can the CEO read these questions out for 3 minutes?
Sorry, through you, Mayor Cole, just needed to unmute my microphone. The question received from Andrew Main of North Perth was, it is quite noticeable in my area that since the requirement for social isolation, there has been an increased number of people walking and riding bikes. I'm interested to know what the city is doing to ensure that impediments to walking and cycling are minimised and that there is adequate space for both pedestrians and cyclists to practice social distancing. The following are issues that I believe the city could address. The practice where footpaths are obstructed by roadwork signage. For example, this was the case on Vincent Street, Leederville on 14 April, where there were 3 sets of signs placed on the footpath on the northern side west of Loftus Street. This reduced the width of the footpath by 50%. On 2 April, a trailer-mounted sign obstructed the whole footpath on the eastern side of Charles Street on the corner of Lauder Street, North Perth. Council street trees or vegetation from private residences that overhang or obstruct the footpath. Vehicles being parked in a manner such that they encroach upon footpaths. This is particularly an issue where perpendicular parking has been constructed by council and vehicles parked on residential verges mean that it is not possible for people to walk on the verge to pass people safely, such as in instances where people are walking on the footpath toward each other. Sand or other debris such as leaves, gum nuts, etc. lying on the footpath. The prevalence of signposts or light poles erected in the middle of footpaths, making this tricky to negotiate. Shopping trolleys being left on footpaths near shopping centres. With high rates of cycling and walking and low vehicular traffic volume, is the council looking at how road space can be reallocated and set aside for active transport users, as is happening in other cities and countries? Is the council considering how to make streets safer for active transport users by filtering to reduce rat runners and drivers travelling at high speeds? Thank you, Mayor Cole. That was the only question received on notice.
Thank you, CEO. So we will respond to those questions in the minutes of the meeting or at the next meeting. Can you just clarify what the process will be there?
Through you, Mayor Cole, yes, we can respond in writing to all questions received notice, and we'll provide a copy of the administration's response to the committee in the following week's papers.
Thank you. Okay, so moving on to declarations of interest. Councillors, any declarations of interest for this evening's meeting? No. Item 5 is applications for leave of absence. Any applications for leave? No. Confirmation of minutes. This is for last week's COVID Relief and Recovery Committee of the 14th of April 2020. Please have a mover and seconder to adopt the minutes. Move Councillor Wondaszewski, seconded Councillor Castle. Those in favour? They're carried. Thank you. So that takes us to business arising, and the first item on this evening's agenda is item 7.1, which is the COVID-19 weekly update. This is the report that actually outlines what's been happening since last we met a week ago and gives a very good running commentary on updates to the implementation plan, any and any announcements, etc. made. Can I have a mover and seconder for this item? Moved Councillor Castle, seconded Councillor Gontaszewski. Councillors, do you wish to speak to it or ask questions? Councillor Castle.
Thank you, Mayor Cole. Just a couple of quick questions. In relation to the Vincent Community Support Network that was decided upon last week and has been open to the public, have we had many people signing up, either offering assistance or needing assistance as yet?
Through you, Mayor Cole, I don't have those numbers tonight at hand. What I do know is that we have been fielding a number of phone calls from potential volunteers or interested volunteers and residents who might require assistance over the last month. So we're going through a process of essentially formalising the network with some of the inquiries and approaches we've had previously, so I can provide the exact numbers to the committee at next week's meeting.
Thank you. I wrote down a question about item 1.2 in the implementation plan about the neighbourhood connection program, which I think might have been answered later on through the agenda. I was just wondering if you could give us some more detail on what that is.
Through you, Mayor Cole, I think that's referring to what's now known as the Vincent Community Network. Okay, there is a reference in a later item to a Neighbourhood Connect program, and I thought they might have been the same things, but that's fine. I'll ask a question about that when we get to that. Through you, Mayor Cole, just to clarify, I think our working title before it was formally announced and adopted by the committee up until last week was about a neighbourhood connection program, which is now formalised and has been adopted by the committee as the Vincent Community Network. Okay.
And I'm just wondering if there's been, in relation to item 2.9, has there been much take up of the virtual library facilities and particularly the stay-at-home book bag?
Through you, Mayor Cole, yes, there has been a high level of interest in the click and collect. I won't say it too quickly. And also the library staff have been very active at providing virtual programs, and I think Mayor Cole provide some public commentary or media on that, and the Mayor might actually know the exact numbers off the top of her head, as I think we provided a response to the local newspaper about the high level of interest in that click and collect program, and we heard from the Minister for Local Government at the end of last week, who underscored to all local governments the vital role that libraries play, and strongly encouraging libraries to continue to provide those services within safe public health guidelines.
Thank you, CEO. We did respond to a media inquiry, and that was just 2 days into the launch of the stay-at-home book bags. And from memory, without just searching through my emails right this second, it was somewhere between 40 to 50 just in that first couple of days. And I think that since that time, that initiative has been shared a lot more widely on social media, and the library has been promoting that with a picture of a young local boy called Freddie, which is a very cute photo with Freddie with his book bag. So I'm sure that's probably just the beginning. I know that when the State Library ran this initiative, they were overwhelmed and had to stop taking requests for a while they sort of regathered and regrouped. So it's just from that very first couple of days we had some figures, but we could certainly ask the library to provide us with an update. No doubt that's grown quite a fair bit over the last couple of days. Councillor Castle, did you have other questions you wanted to ask? Councillor Gontaszewski, do you have any comment or questions?
Thank you, Mayor Cole. Just in relation to item 2.8, the item talks about promotion of the Meals on Wheels service, but just understanding a little bit more about the potential to offer small grants or connection with restaurants in relation to food provision.
Through you, Mayor Cole, I don't have any further details on that proposal. We were exploring whether or not that would be possible, but it's still at an early stage and we haven't formalised it.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Gonchevsky, anything further? I just wanted to just go to item 3.8, which is project readiness stimulus packages. I note there that it's talking about Beatty Park as an opportunity, and just to sort of raise that Beatty Park is probably an ideal project to put forward to the federal government, even though they may not specifically call for stimulus package works to aquatic centres. I think that there's certainly a benefit in us putting that forward. I note that the Deputy Prime Minister McCormack has called for local governments to submit road projects, and it's my understanding that administration doesn't believe we have any that are ready to go, but we certainly do have projects at Beatty Park, which is a significant regional facility, iconic in Perth, and I think it's worth us formalising a proposal to the federal government and then sending that also to WA senators and our local member, our federal member Patrick Gorman MP. The other one I just wanted to raise is that whilst we have already been trying to get together a plan for the west side of Britannia Reserve for the $3 million grant that was announced but still has a business case process to go through, which came about 18 months ago. I think this is also a really good opportunity to fast track that process if possible, to try to secure that $3 million funding so that we can see some construction work happen under a grant that was previously promised, but without that background work having happened through the federal, can't remember the name of the fund, it's a community infrastructure fund, I think it was called. Perhaps someone can correct me if that's incorrect, but I think these are two bodies of work that I think are very critical for us to move forward with and to present to the federal government at this time. I wonder if there's any comment from admin on that.
Through you, Mayor Cole, I might ask the Executive Director of Infrastructure to comment on the proposed works at Beatty Park Indoor Pool, which were in our Capital Works program in the next 2 financial years, but would have required a closure of the indoor swimming pool for 3 months. So we are looking at bringing forward that work, and I might just ask the Director to comment on that.
Yes, Michael, just to confirm, so we are currently scoping out those projects. They were in the main due not next year's capital work programme, but the year after. So we're bringing them forward, scoping them as quickly as we can so that they will be ready to go if money's available, either whether it's internal or external grant funding. So that would include retiling of the pool, some works to improve changing rooms, and some works to the pumping and filtration system. So those are being brought forward rather than the year after next year. So we're just doing that work right now.
My hope was that we could actually take that further and that we could put a proposal to the federal government that would also look at restoration of the grandstand. Look, I know that it might be a pipe dream, but I believe that this is a good time to actually package up all of the works that need to be done at Beatty Park, and if we secure any funding towards Beatty Park, that would be a great thing. But I think that it's worthwhile putting forward a comprehensive package of works, not just limited to the lining of the pool and the minor upgrade of the change rooms, but also looking at the grandstand.
Through you, Mayor Cole, we'll have all those options included in the business case and we'll mark those out as individual line items so we can break it into 3, 6 or 12-month periods.
But in terms of putting forward a high-level proposal to the federal government just to start the discussion, what sort of time frame would that require?
Through you, Mayor Cole, the the manager of BD Parks working on the paperwork for that now, and we can have the summary information ready very shortly. I would have thought that we'd be able to submit something to the federal or state government within the next 2 weeks.
Thank you. And any comment on fast tracking the working group and getting a project proposal together for Britannia Reserve in line with the grant funding for Florida Athena Football Club?
Through you, Mayor Cole, I'll ask the Executive Director of Strategy and Development to update the committee on our discussions with Florida Athena Football Club.
Yes, through you, Mayor Cole, we have been discussing those options with Florida Athena, obviously for a number of months now. The club has still not made a decision to partner with the city and to hand over project management responsibility to the city for that project. So we're still in negotiations with the club about that. Those negotiations have really sped up in the last couple of weeks. So we're right now in the middle of some serious negotiations around that matter, because the council resolution was very clear that that project couldn't go ahead unless the city was a partner in that project. Given that it's a multi-million-dollar development on land that the city manages, it's not in the long-term lease area of the club. They wouldn't be granted that money in any case. They need to partner with the city before that $3 million could even be considered to be provided to them. So the club's aware of that, but they've still been unwilling to partner with the city to this point. I'd also like to just touch on another significant project that we are also trying to fast track, which is the Legal Oval master plan, to try and make sure we have a project that's ready to go to address the issues we have with the grandstand there too. So we have been working very hard on that in the last few weeks as well. So I just flagged that up. We're very hopeful that we have a project ready to go, and that there will be funding from the state government for waffle and football projects, particularly those that support waffle women's and junior women's as well. So we're working on that closely at the moment.
Thank you, Director. That's good news on Legal Oval as well, and I do hope that we can convince Florida Athena that work with us on that grant is essential for us to secure that funding for their benefit. So hopefully that negotiation can continue and be good and timely to wrap it up as soon as possible. I also just wanted to request whether we should be noting in the implementation plan that under our organisation, whether we need to note the recent announcement on the GRV revaluation going forward, given that that's an added complication for the 2021 budget.
Through you, Mayor Cole, yes, we can include that now that we've got confirmation from Landgate that the revaluation is occurring this year.
Okay, just a small matter, but where we've been capturing discussion points coming out of our roundtable town teams, one of the recent issues raised at the meeting last week by North Perth Local was a discussion around advocating for bricks and mortar businesses when they do open in favour of pop-ups. So I don't think that we had a sort of a firm view on how far that would extend in terms of pop-ups extending to major festivals, but this idea of looking to support bricks and mortar businesses re-establish by not having a sort of market flooded with pop-up events, which would probably be more of the ilk of pop-up bars, etc., when some of our licensed venues are trying to get off the ground. So just flagging that one was raised. And just in terms of the good news stories, I think that's a great addition to the papers. And I've just double checked with marketing that those good news stories that have been captured in this document are then being celebrated in our communications and marketing. And they are doing that, aiming to do that in a variety of different ways. That was all from me on this item. Are there any comments from administration in relation to any of the details in this item? No. Council members, happy to move forward? Okay, I'll put the item. All those in favour? Declare it carried. Thank you. The next item is 7.2 COVID-19 Workforce Report. Can I please have a mover and seconder? Move Councillor Castle, seconded Councillor Gontaszewski. Do you wish to ask any questions, Councillor Castle?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Cole. Just a couple. In relation to Beatty Park, there's some numbers here around the staff that have been stood down. And I'm just wondering if there's any more detail around the permanent full-time and part-time staff that have been stood down and the sole traders, because I think I'm aware of where the casual staff have come from, but it was the permanents that I just want some more information on.
Through you, Mayor Cole. So the information we provided in the report referred to Beatty Park staff of 110 casual, 1 permanent full-time, 32 permanent part-time, and 21 sole traders. In effect, in terms of the type of work and the number of hours, the cohort of staff in casual, permanent part-time, and sole trader are essentially the same. They're doing the same work for about the same number of hours, but under a different employment mechanism. So, for instance, a personal trainer or a gym instructor may be employed casually, or they may have their own ABN and invoice Beatty Park or the city for provision of 2 hours of personal training services, and the 32 permanent part-time as a result of a Fair Work Commission ruling 2 years ago. We converted some casual staff who had the option, if they worked more than 2 hours at Beatty Park, to convert to permanent part-time, but they are in effect doing the same amount of work for the same sort of services within Beatty Park, whether it's swimming teaching, gym instruction, or group fitness classes, for instance.
Okay, thank you. And secondly, in relation to our correspondence with the ASU, particularly for those Beatty Park staff members, we have stated that we're going to seek options for redeployment where possible. And I'm just wondering if we've been able to identify any opportunities yet, or whether they might come into play now or in the near future.
Through you, Mayor Cole, yes, that process has been underway for over 3 weeks, and it's formalised about 2 weeks ago, and we're internally advertising positions which either in teams that have additional workloads or vacant positions which haven't been filled externally, and we're seeking expressions of interest from internal staff, including Beatty Park staff, including the casuals who may be stood down, who have the relevant skill set to perform some of those tasks. And that's happening. The numbers are changing. They haven't all been confirmed, but it's happening day to day, and it has been actively progressing with numbers of staff each day in discussions about these redeployment options. We're hoping that it becomes a entrenched program for the next couple of months, so we can have a significant shift in the redeployment of staff from Beatty Park as the amount of work for the care and maintenance regime of Beatty Park decreases, and there continues to be high demand for city services elsewhere in the organisation.
And are those redeployed staff being taken on as casuals or for short-term contracts? What sort of security are they getting in their redeployed position?
In the first instance, we're looking at the permanent staff who may have experienced a drop in workload, and that's particularly related to the large number of permanent staff full-time staff at BD Park, and then casual staff or permanent part-time staff would be employed under the similar arrangements that they have been previously.
Can I request that perhaps for future committee meetings that we can just get some sort of net figures on how many staff that have been stood down remain unemployed by us? Obviously, we won't know if they've had employment elsewhere, but just so we can get an idea of how much redeployment we've actually been able to achieve.
Yes, we can provide those figures. Again, it's just only been happening in the last week or two. We haven't, some of those discussions, individual, trying to place a particular person in a particular area, and there's some training underway, and there's some training underway today to skill up staff to move into a different area. We also are not sure what the impact of these workforce restrictions for BD Park, for instance, will have on some of our casual staff members, and we didn't outline this in too much detail in the report, but for instance, if one of these casual staff members who may have been employed by BD Park for 2 or 3 hours a week, if they have one private employer at another gym, for instance, or leisure centre, and they had more than 1 or 2 hours work with a private provider, and they've been with that employer for more than 12 months, then they will be eligible for the JobKeeper scheme through that secondary employer. And we're hoping, because the City of Vincent's not eligible as the local government authority for JobKeeper, we're hoping that a number of our casual staff who would have worked across multiple facilities may have had a private provider, a private employer, or a charity who would be eligible for that JobKeeper scheme of $1,500 a fortnight.
Yeah, and I would think some of those, the sole traders should be eligible. But yeah, I realise those numbers will probably be fluctuating. They'll be rolling numbers week to week, but it would be good to get a sense of how that's going.
Through your medical, last comment probably on that, we're still at less than 10 staff members or positions that we're looking at redeployment options, but that's changing day to day, so we can provide an update to the committee next Tuesday.
Thank you, Theo. Councillor Gonchevsky, any questions?
No, I think Councillor Castle covered off most of my areas that I wanted info on, but just in relation to the redeployment, so at this point in time, the only people that are being targeted for redeployment are those who have been stood down, or is there those positions being advertised across the city for staff that are currently working and in employment from the city but may have experienced a reduction in their workload? Are they able to, I guess, apply as well through that program?
Through you, Mayor Cole, yeah, we have anywhere between sort of 13 to 17 full-time positions at BT Park. Some of them are part-time positions, and some of those positions involve duty manager and care and maintenance of the BT Park facility. Others are involved in administration, which is ongoing, and management of our membership base. But there are several positions within that full-time cohort of BT Park that we have already targeted for redeployment and have been placed and are working in other areas, and that will continue as well.
Okay, thank you. And in terms of a note from the report, it's talked about that the city's other service areas have experienced, I guess, an increase in demand since the pandemic. I'm just wondering, is there any particular areas that, aside from Betty Park and the library, that have experienced any reduction or significant reduction in workload since the pandemic?
Through you, Mayor Cole, the only noticeable area would be the reduction in car parking workload and demand with our car parks, or the need to infringe car parking, cars who are parked not in compliance with our restrictions, and we have shifted the ranges, the car parking ranges, into community safety work. There has been no noticeable drop in the number of inquiries or applications. Might just ask the Executive Director of Strategy and Development just to comment on how planning applications and other inquiries are tracking, given that the construction industry is exempt from the current restrictions, and the Executive Director of Infrastructure and Environment would be able to comment on parks, waste and engineering and ranges.
Yes, through you, Mayor Cole. The statistics as of the end of last week were consistent again with the applications in number of inquiries and complaints we've received over the last 12 months to 18 months. There has been an uptick in the number of compliance matters raised with the city, particularly in relation to noise and other health-related matters as people work from home and raise concerns about their neighbours' behaviour during the day and the interruption that has on their ability to work from home. Understandably, it's a difficult time for everyone, so there has been an increase in inquiries. But when it comes to the applications, the building permit applications and the development applications have probably been higher, if anything else, during this period, but it's probably not significant. So I'd say they remain the same.
Yes, we may qualify. I say a little bit about the frontline services, which infrastructure mostly is. So as the CEO said, Rangers have refocused their efforts on community safety. So I think it's a good job we've got them, because they've been doing a great job out there talking to people in parks, etc. So that more than counterbalances the reduction in parking activity they've had to do. The other areas, waste, engineering, parks, it's business as usual, really. They're carrying on providing the same level of services. There's not really much change. I'd say there's a bit of extra work created by the, I suppose I call it refocusing because of COVID. I mean, there's more inquiries, there's more thought going into how do we do things, we have to social distance, etc. But as far as services on the street, they remain the same. So in that sense, it's business as usual from the frontline services.
And just on the ranges, just in relation to the question submitted by Mr. Main, some of the things that he's raised in his questions relate to, I guess, obstructions to footpaths primarily and some parking issues. Whilst I understand that the city's ranges have shifted focus from a compliance in terms of that there's not really many cars to infringe. So I guess they've been quite proactive in working with the community around some of the social distancing and health issues in our public spaces. Would I be correct in saying that if a community member has concerns around things like obstructions to footpaths, parking, overhanging branches, etc., that they would then follow the normal sort of reporting mechanisms in terms of having those things dealt with?
Yes, you may call. I read the question and came to the similar conclusion. So from that respect, it's business as usual. Member of the public just needs to let us know. We'll follow it up and we'll take action accordingly. And obviously we think it's important, things like obstructions on the footpath, etc. So yeah, there's Mr. Main can contact us any time and we'll deal with that as we always will.
All right, thank you very much.
Through you, Mayor Cole, just a final comment on that. Given such a large number of our residents are at home during the day, they're obviously seeing and noticing works and things on the street more than they normally would, and maybe things that they'd only notice on the weekend because they do happen Monday to Friday around footpath repairs or the like. And I think that's a positive indication that people are seeing the work that we do during the week when they're usually in the office.
Thank you, CEO. I just had a follow-up question in relation to the employees that have been stood down. And given that permanent full-time and permanent part-time is a different class of employee in terms of the expectation of ongoing work as opposed to a casual or sole trader, what happens once the permanent staff have expired their leave and their mandatory leave? Does stood down mean terminated, or will they then be attempting to find redeployment opportunities for those permanent staff members?
Through your Mayor Cole, we will be advertising and making available those redeployment options in the first instance to permanent staff members, whether they're full-time with BD Park or the permanent part-time staff, which we had referred to. And the manager of BD Park has wrote to all casual, permanent and sole traders yesterday to reiterate the process we're going through, with the proviso that I mentioned earlier, that we're not quite sure about the individual circumstances of a large number of these staff members who may have alternative arrangements with other employers surrounding either the job keeper or the job seeker, depending on the number of hours that they may have been engaged with the city prior to COVID-19.
Thank you. And also just in relation to staff that have not currently been stood down, has there been any thought given to where there may be quiet patches emerging if we do see, for example, a downturn in development applications, whether there'll be consideration of, you know, using leave and tackling the city's leave liability?
Through you, Mayor Cole, yes, and you may be referring also to the local government regulation changes allowing accessing of long service leave early at the 7-year mark, or also the ability to take annual leave at half pay. We have been and we are managing those issues on an individual basis regarding the individual employee's circumstances at home and potentially their care arrangements or homeschooling arrangements. So we do have the ability, and we have been approving cashing out of long service leave on request, and staff members can take their long service leave, and we will be using annual leave and managing that leave balance. You may also be referring to the fact that we did some benchmarking work at the end of last year, which noted that the city does have a high long service leave liability and an annual leave liability, and this may be a good time for staff to take those, to move those leave balances down, but we haven't got to the stage where we need to contemplate requiring that. It would still all be by negotiation and with the agreement of the employee according to their work circumstance, but also according to their personal and home circumstance.
Thank you, CEO. Councillors, any further questions? Okay, I'll put the item. All those in favour? I declare it carried. Moving on now to item 7.3. Item 7.3 is rent abatement and other relief options for city tenants. Have a mover and seconder, please. Moved Councillor Gontaszewski, seconded Councillor Castle. Any questions on this item, or would you like me to seek an update from administration, given that the relevant legislation has just passed through Parliament? Would you like?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Cole. Yeah.
Would you happy to start there before we take questions? Yes. Look, given that this legislation has just passed through the West Australian Parliament yesterday, I'm just wondering whether this item has been able to be reviewed with that overlay, given that that's a very new legislation that has, I don't know if it's actually been proclaimed yet, but it has been dealt with in Parliament. So any update on that would be welcomed.
Through you, Mayor Cole, I might ask the Executive Manager of Corporate Strategy and Governance to comment on the item. You'd obviously note by the length that this is quite a long, complicated item, particularly given the large number of tenants we have, the large number of city buildings, and also some of the unique circumstances facing sporting associations, community groups, and other tenants. But I'll ask the Executive Manager just to provide an update to this report, the background, and also the state government legislation.
Through you, Mayor Cole, we have reviewed the legislation that was passed by Parliament, and our recommendation does align with that. We note that Parliament hasn't adopted its own code of conduct yet, and it's proposing to do so. So that could impact the amount of rent abatement and also deferrals that we can grant. So that would be relevant to Category 3 tenants. So in this recommendation, we're only proposing that we grant a waiver of rent for Category 1 and 2. And so the Category 3 tenants, that would be considered on a case-by-case basis, and we wouldn't make any recommendations in respect to that until the state government has drafted their code of conduct, and then we'd make sure our recommendations align with that. So on that basis, we didn't think we needed to defer this recommendation, because what we're proposing for Category 1 and 2 Category 1 and 2 tenants aligns with the legislation, and like it's a 6-month rent waiver period. The legislation refers to an emergency period from the end of March, so that aligns with our rent waiver period. So on that basis, we don't think we need to defer this.
If I just might add as well, it actually exceeds what's set out in the current legislation for Category 1 and 2. So I think that's important to point out as well. And the Category 3 will be negotiated on a case-by-case basis and presented to the committee. And by that stage, we will have the code of conduct, which will form the basis for those negotiations, obviously.
So the fact that the code of conduct has not been prepared yet, you don't see that having any impact on the recommendation before us in relation to Category 1 and 2 lessees? I'm seeing him saying no.
Yeah, through you, Mayor Cole, Category 1 and 2 will certainly exceed the code of conduct. The code of conduct released by the federal government, which the state's code will be based on. They've stated that a number of times now. Only requires a reduction of 50% and a waiver of the remainder. A deferral of the remainder. What's recommended here is a waiver of the entire amount for that entire period, and it is a manageable amount financially for the city. So on that basis, we recommended that we waive the entire amount for those Category 1 and 2 tenants, given how small they are and how important they are to the community.
Okay, I might just go to move and second the items and then go to council for questions. So just call for a mover, please, and a seconder. Move Councillor Gontaszewski, seconded Councillor Gontaszewski, would you like to ask questions?
No, I think that's clarified things for me. I guess I'm looking at the information on the financial stress and hardship form. I guess one of the things that I think is important that we ask is in relation to whether memberships have been refunded, and I'm just if there is a members-based organisation, but I presume that would be covered in their financial downturn. They're outlined, they have to provide on their accounts, but I'm just trying to see if that it's not specifically captured, if the city is intending to obtain that information from the sporting and member-based organisations.
Through you, Mayor Cole, I don't think we did expressly provide that in the form, but we have been discussing that and we'll make sure that question is asked.
Okay, thank you. No, look, I think in terms of the limit at this point in time in relation to the Category 1 and 2, I think it is a reasonably small amount of funding that we're talking about here in terms of the rent waivers, and that essentially what we're looking at is as we get more information to hand, we'll be able to assess any Category 3 rent waiver deferrals and other applications for financial assistance and hardship. I think it is important that we perhaps make a differentiation in terms of waivers, perhaps versus deferrals, in terms of costs that would have reasonably been incurred during the time of this pandemic versus costs that perhaps were incurred and, you know, would have been reasonably been able to have been funded through memberships or other activities prior to, such as, you know, where we've received requests to waive fees that were, or waive costs that perhaps were incurred quite some time ago. I see that as being perhaps something different to looking at how the clubs or organisations can potentially deal with their loss in revenue that has been directly caused by this pandemic. But I guess we will look at those on a case-by-case basis, and there'll be more information in terms of the state code to perhaps consider some of those requests against.
Thank you, Councillor Gontaszewski. Councillor Castle, did you wish to ask any questions or make comment?
Thanks, Mayor Cole. I just wanted to clarify. So the basis of the waiver of rent for category 1 and 2 is, I guess, an assumption that all of those groups in those categories have suffered some hardship, because there will be some of those groups that perhaps are less affected by this pandemic. For example, some are sporting clubs that, you know, may see an impact in the future but haven't as yet. So I'm just clarifying that we won't be asking category 1 and 2 any questions about what their specific position might be.
Through you, Mayor Cole, yes, that's correct. We're proposing that just all category 1 and 2 tenants will receive a 6-month rent abatement. If they do require any further assistance in terms of the utilities, rubbish and recycling bin charges and ESL, we're proposing that they make a request. So that's in recommendation 2.2.4, and then that would be assessed.
Sorry, I hit the wrong button. I noticed in the form that we're proposing for category 3 applications that we have specifically talked about what grants they may have applied for and that might be available for them. Have we got any information or a position on whether some of those grants might be available to the category 1 and 2 groups as well?
Through you, Mayor Cole, I'm not sure of that. Is any, we can take that on notice.
Through you, Mayor Cole, I think that reference is to Lotteries West announcement of might be $155 million, which would be available for community groups and also event organisers, and the criteria for which we're still waiting on final details. So that has not been confirmed yet, but we would think that there would be some relief through that Lotteries West funding to, and also potentially through the state government, for the state sporting associations in general, and a large number of community groups who have been heavily impacted. So where our community partners team are providing the information, or in touch with those community groups about grant fund opportunities and their eligibility.
Thank you. Yeah, look, like Councillor Gontaszewski, I'm comfortable with this as is, given that, given what you've told us about the impact of the code on category 3, and that can actually be incorporated into those case-by-case determinations. I think it would be good if, while we're giving these category 1 and 2 groups some immediate relief for the next 6 months, that when we do revisit that, not knowing where we will be in 6 months with this pandemic, that some of those elements that we're asking our category 3 groups could be asked to our category 1, well, probably 1 and 2, about how they're faring and how the next 6 months looks for them in relation to both restrictions on their activities and what grants they might have been able to access. So.
Thank you, Councillor Castle and Councillor Gontaszewski. Chesky, very great questions. Look, again, I was just really keen to make sure that what we're proposing here is at least meeting the legislation. And I think that when you look at the sorts of amounts that we're talking about for Category 1 and 2, Category 1 rent waiver, $2,185 as a collective, that's very minimal. And for Category 2, $13,665. I think you also have to ask the question about the administrative, you know, expense of time and effort to really scrutinise and go into that detail. So I'm very comfortable with that. And I think that these are our not-for-profit community clubs, small clubs and groups that don't attract revenue, and it'd be really great to see that if they are able to open up some of that Lottery West funding to help them to do other development work, perhaps to try to get them back off their feet. If we can give the rent ease, then Lottery West can hopefully come up and support them to actually reignite the work that has stalled. I just did have a very brief question in relation to the Kiddies Learning Hub. I'm just not sure, is that actually a childcare centre that attracts the government subsidy? I don't have an issue with this because I note that their numbers have absolutely plummeted, and that there's no way that they could meet this leasing fee on the basis of their numbers. And I'm not seeking to change that, but I was just interested to know whether they are a childcare organisation receiving the 50% subsidy from the federal government, just out of interest.
Through you, Mayor Cole, I'm not sure of that. Executive Director, Strategy and Development, are you sure, or can we follow up and provide that detail?
Yes, through you, Mayor Cole, I'm not certain of that either. The only comment I would make, which is just a comment, is that having children in trouble in daycare myself, I'm confident that they would be, because they're not a local government, and that they have, because they have been asked by the state government to continue operating, I would assume they are, but we have to take on a notice because I'm not certain. Sorry.
Well, thank you. It's not material to the decision for me anyway. It was really just out of interest because I think that they are providing a service for working parents and their numbers are incredibly low, and they're obviously not able to make that payment, so that's not a problem at all. So I'm happy to support the recommendation, and just noting that we're making this decision under delegation provided to us by council in terms of waiving fees. Unless there are any further questions, so I'll put it. All those in favour? To declare that carried. So that takes us to item 7.4. Temporary exemptions within local planning frameworks. This is an item requiring us to note recent changes by the Minister for Planning on the 8th of April 2008, and also talking about concerns or complaints received by the City in relation to matters covered within the notice of exemption. Can I call for a mover and seconder, please? Moved Councillor Gontaszewski, seconded Councillor Castle. Any questions on this item or comment?
So just to confirm, in relation to the temporary exemptions in terms of the financial budget implications, that the 44 applications totaling just 11,800 would be temporary, so the city would still be expecting to receive a portion of those. You know, I understand that this is all sort of approximations and assessments on what's likely in the future, but it is that the city, this would be a temporary, you know, freeze in terms of us receiving fees. But if the activity was to continue, that the expectation is that there would be an application and a fee required.
That is correct. There would need to be an application if those uses were to continue. Of those 44 that are listed, because they were all required DAs under the current planning framework. Yeah, the only, provided nothing changes between now and then, so the city doesn't change, council doesn't change its policy or its exemptions in that space.
Thank you. I don't have anything further on this item.
Councillor Castle.
Thank you, Nicole. Just a question about how this notice of exemption operates in conjunction or in conflict with our own extension to the, no need for development applications that was passed at the special council meeting. So this is in place until the 1st of May 2023. Our policy was for 12 months. How will they operate together? Will they complement each other?
Yes, through Mayor Cole. Fortunately, the timeframes are pretty much identical. So it was for the term of the state of emergency plus 90 days in the case of the change of use exemption the council endorsed, and it's the state of emergency period plus 3 months in the case of these exemptions. So it does say until 2023, but then there is a condition after the vast majority of these exemptions, one of which is the change of use exemption, which says this only applies during the state of the emergency and 3 months afterwards. So the timeframes are the same. That exemption is the same. So they basically this just reinforces what council has already done ahead of the state government doing this, and they work together in unity really.
Thank you, Director. Councillors, any further questions? I'm comfortable with this. This is the Minister's announcement. I think it ties in well with what we're doing with our own relaxation of planning during this period, and it's trying to support business and to just get those efficiencies happening. So I'm very happy to note and support this one.
Nicole, if I just might add, there's just one thing that I omitted from this report that I realised I should have included after I signed it off, and that is how important it is that we communicate with our businesses what these exemptions are and how they would apply. So we are working, as you know, we've been working hard to try and increase that communication, and the team's working to try and ensure that any inquiries that come through we answer in a comprehensive way, more so than we've even done in the past, and that we really promote the city as a source of support for businesses that are looking to make changes to survive during this time. So we really want to promote that, and we really want to provide that support, because as you probably can see by this report, it's very complicated and very difficult for small business owners to wade through all of this, as well as the health requirements and the building requirements for a change they need to make immediately. So I just wanted to flag that up. We are there to help. We're ready to help. We're ready to answer any phone calls, any emails as quickly as we can to support businesses through these changes. So, thanks.
Thank you very much, Director. That's really appreciated. And just to also update that the policy in place team is working on an e-newsletter for business to go out either late this week or early next week, and we'll also be backing that up with a media release just to highlight the planning changes from both the City of Vincent and also from the state government in a sort of simple and easy way to digest that, but also referring people, inviting them to call the city if they do have planning, if they're thinking of putting in a planning application and want to know more. So that's really appreciated. Any further comments? Okay, I'll put it. All those in favour? Declare it carried. Thank you. Next item is 7.5, COVID-19 Public Health Plan Response and Recovery. I'll just ask for a mover and seconder. Moved Councillor Gontaszewski, seconded Councillor Castle, and just also noting we have the Manager of Built Environment and Wellness here if you do wish to ask any questions of the Manager. So over to you, Councillor Gontaszewski.
I don't really have any questions in relation to the content in the report. I note that there have been some themes from the consultation to date that have emerged, and I'm pleased that we've been able to draw out some things other than COVID related items, so that's great. And I'm just, I guess, I'm just wondering what the plan is in relation to how the current pandemic is going to impact on the remainder of the development of this plan.
Yeah, through you, Mayor Cole. The plan is, at this point, as hopefully it's set out in the report, to now progress to developing up a draft set of actions and a draft plan, a draft public health plan that we can then promote to council, or take to council for advertising and promotion to the community for formal comment. And that will be one way of gathering some more views from the public at large, but it will be, and this is the key, I think, it'll be very, very important for us as we work up those actions once the plan is adopted. And then we start to implement the actions, it's going to be very important for us to consult with the community on those actions as we develop them. So that is, I think, going to be the key, because it'll be important for us to have a framework in place on the way out of and through the recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic. And then we'll need to work with the community on the details of each of those actions as we develop them. So the plan is to continue and to try and have a draft plan adopted by council in the next few months to advertising to the community, and hopefully finalisation by the end of the year, so that we're fully prepared with a framework to promote public health and to start implementing those actions in consultation with the community.
Thank you. Is it possible to get whatever is available at a click of a button standard summary on the consultation responses to be circulated to council? Yeah, I'm literally talking whatever standard report would be available. It doesn't have to be pretty.
Yes, through Mayor Cole, that's already been prepared, and that will be circulated at the end of this week.
Fabulous, thank you. Nothing further from me.
Councillor Castle.
Thank you, Mayor Cole. Just a couple of questions, I guess. This is a policy, a plan, and a project that has had to do quite a massive change since it was originally imagined. My understanding of our development of this plan was that it was required regardless of the current pandemic, and that it was a blueprint for the city for the next few years. So I'm just wondering how much of the focus of the plan has had to shift to dealing with current situations as compared to sort of overall ongoing public health issues.
Yes, through Mayor Cole, I would say that there hasn't really been a shift. The issues that came out of the consultation in the first, during March, really just backed up those issues that we were aware of, or they were new issues, and they weren't COVID-19 related. I think there just needs to be an extra part to this plan to make sure that we're aware of the context and that we're supporting COVID-19 as well. I think that the reason why we think this is important is because public health is on everyone's mind at the moment, and it's important that we provide a framework for the community so that they understand what we're doing about other public health issues as much as what we're doing about COVID-19. In relation to when this is required, when the public health plan is required under the Act, I might just ask the Manager of Built Environment Wellbeing if he knows exactly when this was due, because I don't think there was a lot of urgency under that legislation, but I might be wrong.
Yeah, through you, Mayor Cole, the date for public health planning to be mandated is next year. We're doing now ours a little bit earlier. In terms of the interaction between the public health plan and COVID, the strategic principles of the public health plan won't change, but we have this great ability during this time to be able to adapt how we apply that to the new environment that we're in, considering that things like physical activity and our eating habits have changed significantly as a result of COVID, and also the social aspect as well. So I have a pretty strong view that our plan at Vincent will be the most fit for purpose plan that there is based on the timing of its development. So I actually think it's something that strengthens the plan and actually makes it much more fit for purpose.
Thank you. And I'm just wondering, given the current situation, is there any consideration in the plan for what we might be able to do to prepare for future pandemics, God forbid, and also the public health implications of the isolation that has come as a result of this? Because obviously there's been, and I assume a fair bit of focus in the public health plan on the physical health implications, but what we're also seeing is the implications of this isolation that it's going to have on our community, and how we can perhaps prepare better for that.
So one of the key parts of the public health plan is to recognise the interaction between public health and our social structures, the environment, the economic structures, and we've seen very clearly from the COVID-19 pandemic that there is a very close association between all of those factors and public health. So that will definitely be a theme that will be within the plan.
Thank you, Manager and Director and Councillors. Anything further on this item? Okay, I'll put it. All those in favour? I'll declare it carried. That takes us to item 7.6, which is our buy local procurement policies. Can I have a mover and seconder, please? Move Councillor Castle, seconded Councillor Bromwich-Shevsky. Councillor Castle, would you wish to ask any questions on this item?
Thank you, Michael. Just a quick question. In relation to the Walga vendor panel marketplace tool, is this a new tool that has been developed for this purpose, or is it something that was already available?
Through you, Mayor Cole, I'm not an expert on vendor panel marketplace, but my understanding is that it's existing and Walga has secured all its members access to it as part of our Walga membership. So we've taken up that Walga offer. I don't think it's been put together very recently just for this purpose. So I think it was an existing platform, but more important now to ensure that local governments are supporting their local businesses and suppliers.
And just a question about the, says an email will be distributed to all local businesses. Is that inviting them to the platform? Is that an email from the city or from Walga?
Through you, Mayor Cole, I don't know the answer to that, but I can provide that provide that on notice to the committee, whether or not our understanding is we send out the email to our relevant contacts, and that it invites them to register with the platform, which means when we use that platform, they'll automatically receive notice of those requests for quotes or tenders.
It's really, I guess, just a comment that it would be good if that did come from us, because we can also incorporate some of the other initiatives we're doing, including like it could be integrated into health checks with businesses, and could also be a tool for us to ensure that that database is as up to date as possible.
Through you, Mayor Cole, I'll provide that advice to Mayor Cole to ensure that it syncs with other comms that the committee will be putting out in relation to support for small business.
Roger that. Councillor Bromwich-Shevsky, do you have any questions or comments? This is just going forward. I think it would just be really nice for administration to provide some examples of buying local, where that, you know, through this process, where that can really be demonstrated in everyday practice. So I'd be welcoming of any of those buy local examples, procurement examples to come forward to the committee so that we're made aware. That would be fantastic. Thank you. Okay, I'll put the item unless there are any further questions. Okay, all those in favour? Declare it carried. Thank you for that. So just moving to, we have announcements towards the end of the meeting. Really, I think the main one, just to say this week, we've had a bit of a focus on the community initiatives that the city's been driving. And we're also doing a lot of promotion around virtual online celebration of Anzac Day as well. So there's been a lot of communications around our Vincent Community Support Network. The online classes at Beatty Park are getting up to 2,500 views a day, so that's working really well. We've discussed the stay-at-home book bags from the library, and we've also been doing communications around how to engage in Anzac Day differently, encouraging children to paint poppies and draw poppies on their driveways, etc., and for people to participate in the Light Up the Dawn initiative, which is where people go out to their driveways at 6 AM. So I'm maybe bringing some instruments to play the last post, and we have, together with Trevor Stiles, the president of RSL Mount Hawthorn branch, pre-recorded some speeches to transmit and share online on Anzac Day. So that's a bit of a focus this week, as well as looking at whether we can get that information out to businesses this week, and also really kind of break down what these new planning, this relaxed planning laws mean for our local businesses, both from the city and from the state government. So that's the sort of focus for this week. I think as we start to move forward and grapple with our fourth quarter of the budget and start to move into clarifying our budget for 2021, we'll have to start looking at what that means in terms of our services and what we're doing for our community, how we need to retract some of that expenditure and actually have that sort of focus and conversation with the community as we move into that sort of next critical body of work, which is happening now. And you know, after this, we have a budget workshop to try to tie off the impact on our current quarter of the 19-20 budget. So that's sort of where we're at this week, and a bit of a direction on where we're heading in the coming weeks. And just to flag that for, well, before I go to this, I'll just ask if there is any general business to raise this evening. Any general business? So just to note that for the next meeting on Tuesday the 28th, we're looking at the COVID update as usual. We'll be looking at the communications plan to support the work of the COVID committee and administration. I also thought that as part of that item, it would be useful to get an update on the methods of communication that we are currently using, noting our 2 local papers seem to still be being delivered and published and delivered. So I did ask the marketing team just to check in about their distribution rates across the city of Vincent. So some options other than online for those that don't have access. Environmental health update and influenza vaccinations, and an update from Library and Local History Centre and community funding. So we'll be looking at that very important EOI process, the relief for seniors and the vulnerable through the Leadable Gardens Trust funds, which we have called for expressions of interest. So hopefully we'll be able to report back on that next week, which will be a substantial item to consider for the committee. Just noting that we have run a little over time. We do sort of aim for an hour, but tonight we'll be closing the meeting at 6:20 PM. So thank you very much, everybody, for your input. And for those who've joined us on the live stream, thank you very much for tuning in. Thanks, everyone.